victory in Jesus. Now I know all of you know this song. So please stand and let's sing out together. Oh, that sounded wonderful. Thank you. You may be seated. You know, a little rain's going to fall, a little wind's going to blow, but our God is steadfast. Welcome this morning. Those of you joining us on Facebook or a little later on YouTube, welcome. Pastor Paul yesterday was ordained into the Global Methodist Church, and he had some wonderful pictures posted from the ceremony, and it just looked like a wonderful, wonderful service that they had. So we are very, very proud of him, as always. There are numerous announcements today, and you look around, you don't see Pastor Paul or Kathy, but today we have Margaret bringing us our message today, and she always does a beautiful job. Still love the one about the frogs. So I look forward to hearing you today, because I know it's going to be a blessing. There are several things here in the bulletin. The beautiful altar flowers today are to the loving memory of Alan and Karen Hill's in memory of Elsie and Marie Hill on their birthday, and the anniversary of Alan and Karen this month. And they're gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. She does a beautiful job every week. Also this week we have the Friendship Luncheon, and it says Tuesday the 19th. Roast beef, potatoes, green beans, slaw, bread, drinks, and dessert. So, sounds like a good meal. Also, the Administrative Council will meet this Tuesday the 19th at 7 in Bennett Hall, and the members of the Administrative Council are listed there in the bulletin. Next Sunday, our revival begins. It's going to be Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday at 7 p.m. with Evangelist Jason Rowe. But preceding our revival beginning, we're having fellowship supper. The choir is the host. We invite you to come and bring a covered dish. Fill our bellies, but don't fill them too much, so we'll stay awake with Jason's preaching. So be prepared for that next Sunday. There is no choir practice tonight. And have I left out any announcements, or are there any other announcements that need to be made? All right. Our hymn of praise this morning is another good old favorite, Standing on the Promises, hymn number 374. Please stand as you're able. Nothing exciting happened this week?
I actually do have a praise.
All right.
We have a neighbor that has had some challenges in her life. And one of the challenges that she was facing is she did not have a vehicle. And it's hard to function in this day and age without a vehicle. She started a new job and had no way to get there. And I've been taking her to work with her, which is, it's not that big a deal. But we were able on Friday, Thursday, the Lord saw fit for her to be able to get a car.
Oh,
We went to the car lot, and the salesman that we talked to was a fine Christian man. And in the process of talking with her, he said the Lord just put it on his heart to be sure that she left that day with a car. And so she drove herself to work Friday.
how wonderful.
So,
That's a great
That's
praise.
a praise of God.
Yes. Anybody else? Praise the Lord, we're all here today.
Amen.
Do we have any prayer requests this morning? All right.
Keep Stephanie in your prayers. She has surgery on Friday.
Stephanie Fry. Bless
We don't know what time yet, so.
you. Anyone else? Well, I have two. I have my cousin Gary Harden. He has esophagus cancer. He has that Barrett esophagus and he has turned cancerous. So he's going to be having surgery. And on the other side of the family, my cousin Liz had to have emergency surgery this week. Scar tissue had wrapped around her intestines and she had a blockage. And so she is still in the hospital, had to have transfusion. So if you could keep both my cousins in your prayers, I'd appreciate it. Anyone else? Let us go to the Lord in prayer. Father God, thank you for this new day. Thank you for your mercies that there are new every morning. Teach us your ways, transform our minds and hearts. Give us your eyes and love for those we will interact with today and throughout the week. Lord, we ask your blessings on Stephanie as she goes through her surgery Friday, and we ask your blessings on the surgeons that will be performing her operations. We and those that are on our prayer list. The prayer list is numerous, and the unspoken ones that you only know the meaning of. Dear Lord, we pray for our country and for the world. There have been so many disasters the past several months, here and beyond, as well as wars, protests, strikes, hungry, and the list goes on. Bring about stability and comfort for all those suffering. May our church and each of us bring you glory. And now, Lord, hear us as we pray the prayer that you taught us to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Our responsive reading this morning is found on page 740 from Psalms 3. And our response is, deliverance belongs to the Lord. Arise, O Lord, deliver me. O Lord, how How many are my foes? Many are rising against me. Many are saying of me, there is no help from any God. But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory and the lifter of my head. I cried out to the Lord, who answers me through his holy hill. Deliverance belongs to the Lord. Arise, O Lord, deliver me. I lie down and sleep. I wake again, for the Lord sustains me. I am not afraid of 10,000 people who have set themselves against me on every side. Arise, O Lord. Deliver me, O my God. For you strike all my enemies on the cheek. You break the teeth of the wicked. Deliverance belongs to the Lord. Your blessings be upon your people. Deliverance belongs to the Lord. Arise, O Lord, and deliver me. Please stand. Please turn to your neighbor and pass the peace of Christ. I guess. And will our young Christians please come down?
Do you know anybody that's really tall? Your dad's pretty tall? Awesome. Mr. Martin up there in the fire's pretty tall. Didn't know I was gonna talk about him this little bit. Okay, well, today we're gonna talk about a giant in the Bible. Remember that story? Do you remember what it is? David and Goliath. Okay. Well, to get an idea of how tall that Goliath actually was, Mr. James came Wednesday night when we were here for Bible study and came and measured. Okay, you see the banner, and then you see the bottom of the dove wings there. From the floor to up there is approximately 9 feet 9 inches tall, and that's what the Bible tells us. That's how tall he was. Okay, so we can get a sense of the intimidation and the hugeness of him. So today we are going to read the story about David and Goliath, and it comes from 1 Samuel 17. And it's kind of funny that you and I used a lot at the other church, the Illustrated Bible, because Bobby knows I like to show pictures. I like to show what's going on. So I'm gonna stop through here and talk about some things, okay? All right. So the Philistines were ready for the battle. On the two hilltops, with only the narrow valley between them, the armies were assembled, the Philistines on one side, and Saul and the Israelites on the other side. And you can see that in this picture. You've got the armies and then the valley between them. Goliath of Gath towered above everyone. On his head was a massive helmet, a breastplate of bronze, and his legs and arms were sheathed in bronze, and in one hand he carried a bronze sword, and the other one an iron-headed spear as big as a tree. Okay, so we get an idea of how tall that he is. Okay? I challenge you, Saul, bellowed Goliath. I challenge you to send one of your men to fight me. Let the two of us decide the outcome of the war. So what he was proposing was, instead of the armies fighting each other, he was going to represent the Philistine army, and he wanted them to send someone from the Israelite army, and they would fight, and then determining who won, the Philistines would be their slaves, or the Israelites would be their slaves. Okay? Now, also, this had been going on for 40 days, morning and evening. Okay? So every day they would assemble themselves on the hill in the morning and the evening, and Goliath would shout his insults and his challenge. And then here, listen to what happens. At these words, King Saul trembled, and the Israelites were filled with great fear. Well, the ironic thing about this is, we know from the Bible when King Saul was made a king, it said that he was head and shoulders above the other men. So he was one of the tallest people in the Israelite army, and he would have been a logical choice to go, but he didn't. He did not. He didn't trust God. Okay? Also, God had won many battles for the Israelites, but it was like they forgot, and they didn't trust in God. Okay? So 3 of Jesse's sons were among Saul's soldiers, and their younger brother David left the sheep to bring them food. He brought them bread, cheese, and grain. As he reached the camp, he heard Goliath's boastful challenge and saw that no one dared to answer it. I will fight the giant, he said to Saul. So something we need to know about David, of course we see how large Goliath is. He's a younger brother, so he's going to be smaller. He's a shepherd, and he explains to them in the story that he has already overcome a bear and a lion, and that God helped him overcome those animals, and they didn't get to harm the sheep. So in David's thinking, he's like, this Philistine is just like the bear or the lion. God is going to help me overcome him. Okay? All right. But you're only a boy, Saul said. Goliath is a famous man of war. Eventually, however, Saul was persuaded, and refusing both the weapons and the armor, David went to the nearby stream and picked out 5 smooth pebbles, which he put in the shepherd's pouch. Now, I think Miss Margaret's going to talk about the 5 pebbles this morning, or the 5 stones this morning. But the reason that David had to refuse that, because Saul was such a big, tall man, and he offered him his armor, it didn't fit him, and the sword was too heavy. So he's going back to what he knows that he can use as a weapon. He's going to use the shepherd's weapon. Okay? With his sling in one hand and his staff in the other, he walked toward Goliath. Now, I want you to see this, because the sling is not a toy. The sling is not a toy, and it's not even made like our slingshots today. So if you can see this, it has the 2 long cords and a little pocket of leather, and they put the stone in there, wrapped it together, and then they twirl it above their heads, okay, and let it go. And it was used as a weapon by the soldiers, okay? Get out of my way, boy, the champion shouted, his voice heavy with contempt. I don't fight with children. And he also asked him, because he had his staff in his hand. Remember we talked about the shepherd's crook at Christmas, how it had the hook and they could pull the sheep back over into the fold so they didn't get lost. Goliath said to him, are you coming to me like a dog? Are you going to beat me with sticks? So he didn't think much of David as a challenger, did he? He didn't think much of David's ability. Okay, and then I wanted to read this from the Big Bible. because of the words that David said are very, very important. And this comes from verse 45 and 47. You come to me with a sword and a spear, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied, that means disrespected. The battle is the Lord's. Okay? So David put his staff down, placed the stone in the sling, and whirling it around, he let it fly. The stone struck Goliath in the middle of his forehead, and the giant crashed to the ground dead. Okay, so some research on this sling that I found this week as I was studying this is that the sling actually had the force of a bullet. And the ones that used it, the army or the shepherds that used it, once they practiced it, they could actually make it hit something 200 yards away. So that's 2 football fields. So it is a weapon, and it's pretty deadly, and it's pretty accurate. Okay? When the Philistines saw that their great champion was dead, they turned and ran, leaving the Israelites to celebrate the victory. So I have something for us here today to kind of give us an opportunity to apply what happened in the story of David and Goliath to our life. Okay? So I've got a chart, okay, and it says, it's a picture of David and Goliath, and he's pointing at him and laughing at him, and I've got the word giant up here, and then down here is David. So what I kind of want to do with us today is kind of put ourselves in David's position, okay? All right, so David was able to overcome the giant because he trusted in the Lord. He realized that God was on his side, okay? And when we trust in Jesus, we're not alone either. God is on our side as well, okay? So today we're going to say that a giant is any large problem that we can't handle on our own, okay? So over here where David's name is, I'm going to put my name. I'm going to say, well, I'm actually going to say Miss Terry and Mr. James because my giant is going to be something that we went through 6 years ago. All of a sudden, Mr. James got very, very sick, and they thought he had the flu, but he actually had kidney failure. So we were very scared, and we had to pray and pray and pray because we didn't know what was going to happen. Because eventually, at first we thought that he could treat it with medicine, but eventually they told us he would have to have a new kidney and have surgery. So it was a very scary time, very, very scary. And we waited 4.5 years for him to get that kidney, okay? And we prayed, and we just prayed and prayed and prayed. And the way that we know that God answered that prayer is because on Sunday we had a healing service where the pastor anoints people and prays for their healing. And on the following Tuesday, they called Mr. James to give him his new kidney from Knoxville. So we know that the hand of God helped us with that, okay? So our giant would be the kidney, okay? The kidney disease. So what do you think? I'm going to let you write your name on this side. What would be something that you have a really big fear about? Or something, a really big problem, or something that really, really bothers you? You probably may not have one. You know, kids have it good, don't they? They don't. I remember one of the ladies on the radio said this week that she wanted to be a kid again because somebody had dinner ready for her every night. She didn't have to cook. The TCAP test, I thought of that. So on this side where it says giants, write down TCAP test. I thought of that. A hard test would be something that would be a child would have a problem with. And they are. And they're stressful on the teachers too. Trust me. And the principal, right? Right, Mr. Phil? All right. So here we have the giant, and here we have the problems that we listed on this side. But here's what happens, what we sometimes forget, okay? When we compare ourselves to the giant, he's always going to be bigger, okay? That problem is always going to be bigger, and we're going to think that we can't defeat it. But remember, if we trust in Jesus, okay, it's not just you against the giant anymore. So what's happened in this picture? Goliath's laying on the ground, the giant's been defeated. Those things aren't there anymore, are they? Those problems aren't there. But what's on this side? It's not just us. It's God plus David, it's God plus me, God plus you, and trust plus God. It changes things. We need to pray and we need to trust God. Well, in our story, we saw that Saul and the Israelites didn't trust God, but David did. And God gave him the victory over Goliath. Okay? Let's have our prayer. Dear Jesus, thank you for this day, this young man, and this church. And Lord, thank you for the story of David and Goliath. And help us to know that we can trust in you and you will always be there with us. Thank you for loving us, forgiving us, and Lord, you even died for us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, so I have a couple more things here. And of course, everything always goes to the bottom, doesn't it? Well, I'm going to go ahead and give you your snack first. You don't have cheese and bread, but you have Cheez-Its and some rock candy suckers. Here we go. So what I have for you today is a trust stone. Have you ever seen these? You think you have? So what it is a stone, and it has the word trust on it, and we're not going to throw it at a giant or anything like that. But most often, people keep them in their pocket, okay? And then when you are going through a big problem, or you have something really difficult to go through, people often will rub them, or they'll just reach in their pocket and touch it, and it just reminds you that you can trust God. That you can trust God that He's going to bring you through anything that's difficult for you. Okay? Awesome. And guess what? I'm going to give you a second treat for showing up today. Awesome. Thank you, Bob.
And from now on, every Sunday, I'm going to look at those wings and I'm going to think about Goliath was that tall. Will our ushers please come forward? Let's pray. Dear Lord, bless this offering that we are about to receive. Bless it to our church. For it is in your name that we pray.
Good morning, everyone. Phil has suggested that we use this. So, stand with me a moment while we get situated. And I have to turn it on, right? Do I have it on now?
God. Woo-hoo.
All right. Today's scripture is in Samuel, 1 Samuel 17. But don't panic. I'm not going to read the entire chapter. The focus is going to be on the 40th verse. There will be references to all of the other verses along during the way. Terry has touched on some of them already. But the emphasis is going to be on verse 40, and it was just easier to put it that way in the order of worship. So, the 40th verse is he, and he being David, selected 5 smooth stones from the stream and put them in his shepherd's bag. Then, armed with only his shepherd's staff and a sling, he started across the valley to fight the Philistine. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Excuse me. It was a cool, clear morning. It was the beginning of a day of great adventure and high danger. War clouds were gathering, battle lines were forming. Today could be the day a man could either die or become a hero. And then there was David. David woke up to the same old boring thing that he had done every day. Sheep. He had to take the sheep to find them grass to eat. Then he had to lead them to water. And then they had to go find grass again. And then he had to herd them into their pen. And all of this took all day because sheep are slow. They're slow when they walk, they're slow when they eat, they're slow when they drink. Sheep are just slow. So at the end of the day, he finally gets the sheep back home. Next morning, he has to start all over again. Now, he had had some excitement a few times as he tended sheep. There had been the time that the lion had tried to attack the flock. And there had been the time that the bear had come through. So that was kind of exciting. But today, the only ones really facing excitement were his older brothers. They were in the army that were going to be battling the Philistines. David wished that he could trade places with them, or even just at least find out what was happening. That was another problem right now. The boredom was bad enough, but knowing if his brothers were in danger, or knowing how the battle had gone, that was really something he wondered about. And he wasn't the only one. Their father, Jesse, wondered as well, how the three older boys were doing and how the battle was going. So David was about to get a big break from his boredom. Be careful what you wish. We look at verse 14 through 11. The Philistine army had a hero named Goliath, who was from Gath and was about 9.8 feet tall. He had a bronze helmet, bronze armor. The armor itself weighed 125 pounds. He had a bronze sword strapped to his back. His spear was so big that the head of the spear weighed 15 pounds. Goliath went out and shouted at the army of Israel, "Why are you lining up for battle? I'm the best soldier in our army, and you all are just little puny servants of Saul. Choose your best man to come out and fight me. If he can kill me, our people will be your slaves. But if I kill him, your people will be our slaves. Here and now I challenge Israel's whole army and their little God. Choose someone to fight me." Saul's men heard what Goliath said, but they were so frightened they couldn't do anything. And then looking at verse 16. For 40 days, every morning, every evening, over and over, Goliath strutted out in front of the Israelites, spouting his insults. Now, this was obviously an early form of psychological warfare. The taunts and the insults, day in, day out, over and over, wore down the morale of the Israelites. Now, I'm sure that there are some people here today that are fishermen and fisherwomen. If I took a poll, we would probably find all different levels of expertise, fishing styles, equipment used, all different kinds. One day a man decided he was going to go fishing. He got all of his gear together, and he had a lot of gear. He had rods and reels and lines and bobbers and spinners and floaters and live action lures. You name it, he had it. He took off to the riverbank, got everything all set up, rigged up his line, cast it out in the water, and waited. And waited. And waited. Nothing happened. While he was waiting, he noticed just a little ways down the bank was a young boy fishing as well. Looked like he didn't have anything more than a stick, a line, and a hook. But the little boy was pulling fish in as fast as he could get his line back out in the water. Now the fisherman was a little upset, but really more curious. So he yells down to the little boy and said, "Son, what are you using for bait?" And the little boy picked up a tin can. And the man said, "Worms?" The little boy nodded yes. Well, the man was prepared. He had brought worms too. So he took his line out of the water, got it all rigged back up with the worms, cast it out, and waited. And waited. Still nothing. Not even a nibble. So now he really was upset. He walked down to where the young boy was fishing. He said, son, you said you were using worms for bait. I'm using worms too, but I've not been able to catch anything. Why?" And the little boy mumbled something that the man couldn't understand. And he said, "What? What did you say, son?" And the little boy goes, "You got to keep the worms warm." The fisherman and all of his equipment, he was involved in fishing. But the young boy, keeping his worms warm, was committed to fishing. And that's a good description of the difference between Saul and his army and David. The Israelites were involved in battling the Philistines. But as we see, David would prove to be totally committed. As we just read, Goliath was not your usual soldier, not even your usual big soldier. The King James gives his size as 6 cubits and a span. That's fine. What's a cubit? What's a span? Bend your elbow and raise your hand. From your elbow to the tip of your finger is a cubit.
Now stretch your fingers out as far as they'll go. Thumb tip to pinky tip is a span. A span is about half a cubit. But depending on the length of the arm and the size of the hand that's doing the measuring, Goliath could have been anywhere between 9 and 11 feet tall, because a span and a cubit wasn't uniform across everybody. He was big, regardless of how you measured it. And then you consider 125 pounds of armor, and that was just his breastplate. Wearing that twice a day, every day for 40 days. Now, I assume if that armor had slowed him down, he would not have worn it. And then to have a shaft, a spear with a shaft big enough to hold a 15-pound spearhead, that shaft had to be the size of a log. So not only was Goliath enormous, he was also extremely strong. Now, if I had been David, that would have been enough excitement for me to see, and I would have turned around and gone back to the sheep. This is an exciting story. Most everyone's heard it before. The kids have heard it today. I'm going to give away the ending for you, though, if you haven't heard the story. David killed Goliath. He saved the country. He became a hero. He collected a reward. He freed his family from ever having to pay taxes again, and he got the girl. Now that's a pretty good story. Pretty good ending. But I like the middle part of the story better. And that's what we're going to look at this morning. David, Jesse's youngest son, the shepherd boy, volunteered to fight Goliath. And in paraphrase, Saul basically said, son, that is suicide. You will not be able to win. But David insisted that with the help of the living God, he would be victorious. So Saul finally consented and prayed that the Lord would be with him. Then David prepared for battle. And he had some people help him. And in their best intentions, they suited him up in Saul's armor and gave him Saul's weapons. David took a few steps to see what that felt like and realized immediately that was not going to work. So he took off Saul's armor, instead opting for what he knew and what he had experience using. And now our emphasis verse, number 40. He selected 5 smooth stones from the stream and put them in his shepherd's bag. And then, armed with only his shepherd's staff and a sling, he started across the valley to fight the Philistine. To do battle with a towering giant, David took a sling, a stick, and 5 stones. Now here's where we ask the title of the message question. Why 5? That's a question that's been discussed many times and in many ways. If David had truly trusted God, why did he need 5 stones? One would have worked, right? We see that one worked. So why 5? Well, some scholars have speculated that in looking ahead, in 2 Samuel 21, 15 through 22, we see mention of 4 more giants. And the speculation is that those may have been a brother, some brothers, some sons, some way, family of Goliath. And in the eye for an eye era of the Bible, seeing Goliath killed would have been ample reason for family members to seek revenge. David might have been anticipating the need to fight them as well. So why 5? Maybe to have the necessary ammunition for Goliath and his 4 family members. Another possible answer to why 5, just chance. David reached down into the stream, pulled out a handful of stones, and it just happened to be 5. But this theory is easily shot down, so to speak, when we examine the construction and the use of a sling in David's time. Now, this was not a slingshot like what we have today. It wasn't made of wood, it wasn't made of metal, it didn't have elastic bands on it, and it wasn't used for flipping marbles. This was a long strap constructed of leather or woven cord. It had a loop on one end, a big knot on the other end, and a sort of pouch in the middle. They would slip the loop over their middle finger, take the knot and place it in their hand, and as the little pocket hung underneath, that was where they placed the stone. Then the sling would be hurled a few times, and at the appropriate moment, released and send the stone flying. Now, sling stones were smooth, but they were not the size of a marble, nor were they flat. They didn't fit in the crook of your finger like what you use when you're skipping stones across the pond. A sling stone was about the size and the shape of a tennis ball. You could not pick up 5 of those all at once just reaching down into a stream. And also, verse 40 tells us that David didn't just grab the rocks. He selected the stones. That indicates careful consideration, choosing just the right stone for the intended purpose. And that purpose was defeating Goliath. Now, another possible why 5 answer could be that the stones were symbolic of spiritual ammunition that David would need for a victory in completing God's plan to overcome these outrageous odds. And if that's the case, we could give these 5 stones labels. We could label them faith, trust, strength, obedience, and courage. Now, we know it only took 1 stone to slay Goliath. And I'm sure David did not fumble around in his bag as he was running across the valley for just the right stone. He picked up the first one he touched because he had already chosen the right stones for the job. Now, if from his bag the first stone that he touched and pulled out was labeled faith, we would see that even though David had no tangible proof, David still had faith. But that faith did not lie in his abilities, but rather that faith was in God, who would allow him to be victorious. So the stone of faith would have defeated Goliath. Or let's say David's hand came out of the bag with the stone labeled trust. David trusted that the same God who empowered him to kill a lion and a bear in the past would give him the same power to be victorious today. David trusted in God enough to be confident that a sling and a stone were sufficient. The stone of trust would have defeated Goliath. Say David's hand went into the bag and came out with the stone labeled strength. Herding sheep around all day is not an easy job. A shepherd had to find green grass or standing hay for the sheep to eat. If none could be found, he would have to cut branches down out of the tree that had green leaves or tender twigs. And this had to be done twice a day. And then the shepherd had to find water for the flock. And they preferred still, calm pools because they were afraid of swift running water. If no pools were available, the shepherd had to take them to a well, remove the huge rock that was usually placed on top of the mouth of the well, and then haul up enough water so that the flock could have their fill. And then if all of this had taken them far away from their permanent pen, so far that they couldn't get back by nightfall, they would have to construct a temporary pen, maybe out of thorny bushes lined up against a rocky outcrop. All of that took strength. The stone of strength would have defeated Goliath. Maybe David's hand came to rest on the stone marked obedience. David chose David to be a king one day. David could very easily have rejected that and say no, but he didn't. He was obedient. And David's father sent him to King Saul at the king's request. David could have refused to go, but he didn't. He was obedient. And then once there, he became Saul's armor bearer and played the lyre to soothe Saul's troubled spirit. And Saul was so pleased with David, he sent word to Jesse asking that David be allowed to stay there with him, which he did. David was obedient, and the stone labeled obedience would have defeated Goliath. Or David could have drawn out of his bag the stone labeled courage. Out in the hills, all alone, tending his sheep, fighting off lions and bears, offering himself as the sole defender of the Israelite army and the defender of the name of the living God. Not only facing down a giant, but running toward that giant and ultimately defeating him. Courage on top of courage. The stone labeled courage would have defeated Goliath. Now, another why 5 answer is based on the theory of numerology. Numbers in the Bible have many meanings and many different significances. For example, the number 1. The number 1 represents unity. The one true God. I am that I am. Jesus and the Father are one. Unity. Or the number 2 symbolizes witness. The 2 cherubs on the Ark of the Covenant. The disciples being sent out 2 by 2. Wherever 2 or more are gathered in his name. Witness. 3 is the number for perfection and completion. The 3 in 1 Trinity. Repeating something 3 times, like holy, holy, holy. The 3 words from Christ on the cross. It is finished. Jesus raised from the dead on the 3rd day. Perfection and completion. Or maybe the number 4. 4 represents God's creative works and his faithfulness. We have the universe, the sun, the moon, the stars, the 4 seasons, the 4 compass points, the 4 gospels, God's creation and faithfulness. And then we come to the number 5. 5 represents God's grace, mercy, and favor. The 5 books of the law, the 5 different types of offering that we see in Leviticus, the 5 sections that the book of Psalms is divided into, 5 commandments on each of the 2 tablets, the miracle of the 5 loaves feeding the 5,000, the 5 wounds of Christ, nails in the hands and the feet, and the spear in the side. God's grace and mercy and faith. So why 5? 5 stones could very easily represent God's grace and mercy and favor. Whatever the answer truly is to why 5, we'll never know. But the result is still the same. David only needed 1 stone to defeat Goliath, but then he still had the other 4 in his bag at the ready for when he needed them. People today face all manner of giants. Not giants named Goliath, but giants just the same. And none of us face the same giants. Pride, the loss of a job, anger, fear, hurt, anxiety, missed opportunities, divorce, the loss of a loved one, change, bullying, illness. It can go on and on and on. And I might feel that the giants I face are bigger and badder than your giants. Or you may see your giants as being so much worse than anyone God's perspective, viewing us down here, they aren't giants at all. None of them. They are just opportunities. Opportunities for faith and trust and obedience and strength and courage. God gives us the ammunition, the stones that we need to defeat our giants and to win the victory. Would you pray with me? Our Father, give us a bold faith like David, a faith that moves past our fears and beyond our giants. Give us a broad vision of your purpose and your kingdom, and then make us victorious warriors as we give all the praise and the glory to you. In Jesus' name, amen. Our closing hymn is 368. If you would stand as you're able. Heard in your voice, seen in your actions, and be a guide for your choices today and always. Go in peace and serve